I'm not quite sure how to even start this story. A lot of things I've experienced never really fit into the subreddit's guidelines until yesterday, when the story wormed its way into my head again. This story happened when I started a new school in the middle of the 6th grade. I'm 19 now. This was technically my first middle school, and for many, many reasons I transferred out. This definitely didn't help. About halfway through, I switched into Spanish to finish out the year. I had almost always had a foreign language class, so I thought it'd be a pretty easy grade to end with. There was a lot of buzz surrounding the Spanish teacher, Mr. D, and when I first saw him and how he acted, I thought I could tell why. He was a pretty eccentric guy if you only heard his voice and weren't looking at his stern face. You'd think he was pretty jovial. He almost always pronounced our names wrong, and he had this gigantic windmill on wheels in the corner of his room. The windmill reminded me that I'd actually heard about this teacher from an older boy called Jay in my Sunday school class. Weird how things can change so much in a number of years. I remember telling him I was going to his school. My mom and I had run away in the middle of the 6th grade year, and I would start at my new school after Christmas break ended. It was nice to know I had at least a couple of people that I knew, so if I asked if he could go tell me about the school, or if he had any advice, Jay had told me that if I ever got Mr. D to transfer out immediately. It sounded a little bit dramatic, but as we got more acquainted with Mr. D, so too did he get more acquainted with us. One thing that always made us all uncomfortable was how he'd rub chapstick on his lips fairly aggressively for like a minute, which was definitely made worse when he'd start with one leg resting on something and his crotch leaning forward. Sure, it was pretty uncomfortable, but not the worst thing in the world, just a bit odd. Have you ever seen a woman with her boobs resting on a desk? Sometimes it's on purpose, and sometimes it's an accident, especially when you're short and sitting down. Mr. D started to do this, but with his dick. He'd stand close to a desk to look at their work, but his bulge would be laying on their desk. He wasn't desk dick height either, so he stretched a little to do it. But given how strange he already seemed to be, I brushed it off as him not being self-aware. I just felt bad for the first row. Flash forward, and all of his little idiosyncrasy seemed to be a little more prominent as the days marched on. I remember once he even answered his phone and carried the conversation on a bit before stepping out of class. I should note, he wasn't a great teacher. He wasn't even a good teacher. English obviously wasn't his first language, which was fine because he was sent there to teach Spanish. Unfortunately, he didn't speak Spanish either. He'd always use the school PC to pull up Spanish videos on YouTube for us, and would mindlessly stare at his personal laptop. Like I said, a pretty easy class. I just feel bad for the other students who didn't already know certain things when the test came. We walked in one day, and on my desk, the chair in front of mine, and the desk in front of mine, there was a semi-straight line of off-white liquid. It was mainly on my desk and thin across the chairs in the front desk. Mr. D came over, not quite fast enough as the kid behind me asked what it was. All we got was nothing, as he very quickly wiped it away with his hands and rubbed it on his pants. He couldn't say water because it wasn't clear. It really only looked like one thing, but there wasn't any way to definitely prove it was. I tucked my hand into my sleeves and did my best not to touch the desk. About a week after that, I came into my English class at the end of the day to hear one of the girls having a pretty loud argument with our English teacher. I walked in at the middle, but the girl Megan was extremely upset and asking why she couldn't go to the principal. Megan was a little bit of a hothead, sure, but she still was a really nice girl. I couldn't see her dramatizing a situation this much. I later found out what had happened from my best friend at the time, who was in Mr. D's class when it went down. Their class was ahead of us, so their test was scheduled for that day. After papers were passed out, Mr. D went back to zoning out on his laptop again. Megan needed to ask a question. She had her hand up for ages, and he never noticed, so she went over to where he was and freaked out on him. He was watching porn with the sound off on the laptop he had always brought with him and gave all of his attention to. So when I came in, Megan was being reprimanded for being pretty verbal with Mr. D. Our teacher was basically telling her she shouldn't have been upset with the teacher watching porn in class, and that it's his laptop, as if it nullifies anything. Looking back, it explains so much of his shitty behavior. The desk dick rest, the hardcore stares, the personal laptop all the time, and the definite cum on our desks. It wasn't the first time he'd done it, and wouldn't have been the last if he hadn't gotten suspended for the rest of the month. Mr. D disappeared when we had a sub finish out the rest of the year with us. I got the fuck out of that school. After everything that had happened, but still kept in touch with a couple of friends who went. They told me that Mr. D was back, but for a while was the gym teacher and co-soccer coach, and the next year taught English. I really want to say, it surprises me he was brought back, even without knowing anything about what he teaches, but it doesn't. In hindsight, that school was atrocious. I have so many memories of bad shit students and teachers alike did. Another teacher was only given a suspension for actively looking down girls' shirts and up their girls' skirts when they were bent over. It's just concerning to know Mr. D probably still works there. I've had a lot of worse shit happen to me, and I'd still suppress this memory for ages. So, teacher who came on my desk and definitely scarred some kids for life. Let's not meet. This started in September of 2018. I had just started college and didn't have any friends there. The only person I spoke to was my ex-boyfriend. He introduced me to this woman, Kat, who was 27. I was 16, but despite the age difference, we got along pretty well. Then my ex dropped out of college and I started to talk to Kat more. We became pretty good friends. I would stay at hers, we'd get high and watch TV. Pretty fun, right? Then it got weird. She wanted me to stay at hers 2 or more times a week, often ringing me every other day and even phoning me 13 times in the space of a few weeks, asking me to go over. She then moved out of my city and moved to Manchester to go to uni. She asked me to stay at hers just after my 17th birthday for 2 weeks. This was the longest I'd ever been without my family, but I went anyway. Most of it was good, except for a few times when I'd get kicked out so she could work. She was a sex worker, and when she'd leave me alone for over 12 hours to go to the parlor, she also gave me a necklace that said something about me being her daughter, so hence the adoption. About 2 weeks after I got back to my city, she called me again. She told me she had had a psychotic breakdown, that she could barely remember anything that happened over the 3 days, had to be retrained in hospital, and that she had tried to kill her best friend. She also made a point to say that she was okay until I left, basically trying to blame me for her breakdown. Any rational person would have cut shit off then and there, but I guess I'm too nice. I didn't tell my friends or my boyfriend what she had done. I just kept it to myself and carried on as if normal, until she said something to my boyfriend that changed everything. My boyfriend and I are talking about moving out of the city when we go to university, and he told Kat and his friends this at college. She then says, "You're stealing my blank name." This was the final straw. I told my boyfriend what she had done, and he was obviously waiting for me to stop associating with her. She then sent me a message asking me to meet her after college, making a point to say, "Just the 2 of us." This was obviously terrifying, and I blocked her on social media and her phone number. She then gets another 17-year-old on my boyfriend's college course to ask me why we have been bullying her, etc. It was incredibly pathetic, and I was left wondering who else she would include. After this, she left me a long string of messages saying that this was not to tell anyone anything she had told me, as I should respect her privacy. I left her on red. So Kat, let's not meet. So, to start off, I live in a village in the northeast of the UK. There are only 100 or so people living here, and hardly anyone knows its location. Me and my mom have lived here for around 5 to 6 years, and and we do love it. There's woods behind our house, and out front there's a pen with 2 lovely horses that I go feed apples and carrots to. However, we have a family from hell next door. The problem with our neighbors started around a year ago, on the 2nd of January. I was downstairs just watching TV while my mom was cleaning out the fire. She went outside to empty out the ashtray, and I could hear her mumbling from outside. The next thing I knew, my mom came inside with the most confused expression ever. I asked her what she was up to, and she told me after she had emptied our ashtray, our neighbors burst outside into our yard and screamed at my mom over the fence, saying nonsense like, "Oh, so Ellie can't park anywhere around here anymore, huh? How disgusting." I was confused, so I asked her what she meant. Basically, my mom had messaged our other neighbors wishing them a Happy New Year, and all that stuff as they were at their other house and couldn't tell them in person. But while she was texting them, she saw a car parked around the back of their house. She asked them if it was anyone to do with them. Now, she didn't really care about the car. She was just curious because that they were usually parked there with their car. It turns out it was my evil neighbor's son's girlfriend's car. Now, this is where things get out of control. My 2 neighbors text each other about my mom's question, and for some odd fucking reason, they see it as a threat. Yeah, ridiculous, isn't it? Me and my mom just shrugged it off because, to be perfectly honest, we couldn't care less about it. A few hours go by and my mom went out back again so we can empty the bin. Once again, my neighbor comes out storming, but this time she starts threatening my mom, saying things like, "I'll fucking kill you," and "I'll run over your dogs, you fat bitch." I was in the kitchen, so I heard everything, and I was shocked. What was wrong with her? My mom had had enough and came back inside and called her boyfriend and the police. The police came, and my crazy bitch of a neighbor admitted everything we told him was true, and that she was threatening to hurt us. But like typical British police, they said there was nothing they could do, and told my mom to keep a journal and write down anything she does before he left. There were a couple of incidences where she would record my mom and her boyfriend in the garden, and complain about our fire pit. But the next big incident was soon to come. My mom dropped me off into the town that was around half-hour drive away so I can go shopping with my mates, and drove back home. She decided to park around the back of our house because she needed to empty out the boot and put things into the garage, and decided to leave it there because it was our parking space. A couple hours go by and I asked my mom to come pick me up because I had finished shopping with most of my friends. I had gone home to expect one of my friends whose train was still going to arrive in half an hour. My mom goes out to the back and sees that our neighbor has blocked her in, so she goes up to her door and asks if she can quickly move their car. No answer. So she knocks again. No answer. She was clearly in because she didn't go anywhere without her car. So after 5 minutes, my mom got fed up and called the police and asked them to help move her car. When the police arrived, she came outside. When they asked her to move the car, her answer was no. They kept asking her to move her car, and her reply was no for over half an hour, making my mom late to pick me up. My mom was furious and pleaded to let her get in her car to pick me up because I've been diagnosed with severe anxiety and I can't be left alone. My mom phoned me while the police were talking to our neighbor and explained what was happening. Thankfully, I wasn't alone because my friend was still there with me. Even he had missed his train and was phoning his parents, explaining the situation to them. In the end, my mom got a ride in the stepdad's car to come pick me up. We also offered my friend a ride home. She moved her car while they were picking me up. I could write 1,000 things that these people have done, like how they filmed me, a 14-year-old trans guy, sunbathing in my garden because they thought my Switch I was watching videos on was an iPad. Or when one morning they opened our back gate open so that when we let our dogs do their morning business, they nearly ran into a busy road. Or even when she came into our yard and nearly knocked down our door because our dogs were barking back at her dogs. But this post has already gone long enough. I haven't even gotten to the recent story. The most recent incident happened the start of this year. For starters, in December of 2019, my dog Pippin died. It was her time to go, sadly, but we decided to stop her suffering and put her to sleep. So this was already a hard time for me and my mom, because I've given her at an age of 2. I'm now 15. But one day, while I was in my bed, my mom was downstairs cuddling with my 1-year-old puppy when she noticed something was wrong. He just couldn't lie down. He had a bit of foam coming from around his mouth and he was shivering like crazy. He then started to vomit violently and threw up this weird substance that looked like chicken. But it was coated in something red, and no, it wasn't blood. My mom was positive it wasn't. She immediately took him to the vet because we just lost my 13-year-old dog. There was no way we can lose my 1-year-old puppy only a couple of days after we lost Pippin. Thankfully, after a lot of injections and vet visits, he was back to normal. Now, we didn't give him any treats that would make him sick. Just fed him his normal dog food, and my other dog was completely fine. He also couldn't have gotten something off the floor because we had just finished tidying up the house. What we think happened to him was when we put him out to do his business, that fucking psychopath of a woman threw something over our fence, knowing he'd eat it. What makes it worse is that she was a fucking vet, so she knew exactly what is toxic to dogs. Luckily, we're moving away from this crazy bitch this week, and her husband are now in trouble with the law, because they nearly beat a man to death when they were drunk, which now means the police are starting to believe us. So, my batshit crazy neighbor who films minors sunbathing and poisons dogs, let's not meet. Unless it's you behind bars, then I'd love to meet you again. This happened to me like 3 or 4 years ago. Sorry for any mistakes, English is not my first language. First of all, I am introvert, just shy. My only romantic relationship was fast. This was my potential second serious relationship. I was 22 years old. I lived in a big city back then. I was a single forever mindset back then, but not really familiar with meeting apps. I had always talked online, but never did any IRL meeting, because I'm a coward. Paranoid everybody's coming to get me. Well, guess I was feeling really lonely, and just installed a dating app. At some point, a guy, 28, handsome in the eyes and full of charm, wants to meet me, a 22-year-old nerd, and to be honest, I made a full move, because he wants to meet at my place, and I've accepted it. I was stupidly thinking, hey, he wants to meet me at my place, so he's not meaning any harm, initially. Don't be like me, kids. Use your brain. Yeah, no, he means no harm, but he was weird as fuck. First, I insist to meet him when the sun was still up. After many texts where he was trying to change my mind, he complies and meets me at my apartment hall. I was charmed. He was tall, a little buff, soft eyes, and knows how to talk. For you to picture the scene, I was, and still am, nerdy type with glasses, skinny. Told him that we had to use the stairs because it's been a month since the elevator was out of service. Tried to smile even if I was nervous. I felt I was too. But here's where things get weird. When we were using the stairs, the sun was up high in the sky, but he suddenly says he was drunk, and he was back from a party with his friend. He started to trip on his own foot while going upstairs. Okay, wow, weird. Maybe he was just nervous, so I stop in the middle, turn around, and ask genuinely where his friend was and if he wants to go back. I will not force him in any ways or wait for his answer. He assures me that he's okay and just a little drunk. There's no smell of alcohol, but his eyes were in focus and it alarmed me. He was playing being drunk or high? Then it begins to scare me for real. I insisted, okay, you're not right in your mind. Come with me and I'll call a taxi if you need it. Sorry to have to make you move when you were obviously sick. And began to go down the step and expect him to follow because, heck, at least have some common sense and don't go to a stranger's place when you know you're sick or high or whatever. He suddenly grabs my arm and squeezes it. I'd almost fallen down because I was not prepared. We were in the middle of the stairs and it was dangerous for both of us. Said it to him and insisted smoothly just to cancel for today. His eyes were focused now and he says, "No, I'm alright. Where do you live?" Maybe because of shock I answer, "I was living on the last floor." He stands straight and his hand's still on me. He began to go upstairs and I don't know why I haven't reacted, but I was following him. Like, dude, what the fuck? It's dangerous if we stay in the stairs. That was his last words before we silently reached the floor. In the doorway, he let my arm go. We discussed a little because I was really concerned about what had just happened. He said smartly, when I look back and just think that I was dumb, he wants to rest a little bit and needs water. As a simple-minded person who cares about the other's well-being, I began to hurry to open the door and invite him in. Oh, dude, I was so stupid back then. I was living like every student, in a worn-out small apartment, saving money to spend it on video games instead of actual food, forced to drink water on the end of the month while cycling and watching food porn on YouTube because I think it was worth it. He made unusual comments like, "Oh wow, it's cozy here." I had no decorations because my life depends on my laptop and Wi-Fi, so yeah, I'm not really a warm place to be. Then he starts to call me with other names while talking. Had said nothing but, "Hey, it hurts, you know. At least remember my name." But I was still on the episode in the stairs and tried to ask him if it was a good idea for him to stay here when he obviously isn't well. Not that I don't want him to stay, but dude, you need to care for yourself. I was about to grab my phone and call an ambulance when I saw he was pale suddenly, but again he grabs my wrist and with force. Remember, me, nerdy type who works out by swinging their legs under a table. Him, buff and alpha type full of force. I have survival instinct and I'm not fool enough to argue against him when he scares the heck out of me. Side note, I may develop it with humor, but it was really a little traumatic experience for me. Never ever will I meet someone IRL again. First and last experience. It's not the end of the story, so again, his eyes were perfectly focused after being blurry all this time. I just didn't understand anything anymore. I wanted to scream for him, but nothing came out. He says he don't need that. He knows perfectly how to go back and invites me to sit in my own house. And again, like a puppet, have to play it cool and don't show my fear. At this time, even if the story was years ago, I remember it with every detail. So at this time, my only thought was, give him whatever the fuck he wants and kick him out. Problem is, it's my own house. I invited him. I'm fucked. Then my marvelous brain suggests me to play it like a mad nerd. Desperate me obeys and starts to say incoherent things for him to think I'd lost my mind and decide to go out. Well, I think I effectively scare him because he says, "I have to go to the bathroom." Insert shocked Pikachu meme here. While he was in the bathroom, I heard him running the water. Not thinking twice, I grabbed my phone and text the first friend on my list, but being stupid as fuck, I just say, "Hey, what's up? What are you doing?" I was panicking. A stranger I invited was in my house. If I call the police, what can I say? "Hello, I invited a psycho, please help me." No time to think anymore. He gets out of the bathroom and looks at me, afraid, and he asks, "Have you changed your hair color?" "Well, why are they red?" "I'm Asian." Typically Asian looking, big glasses on a round face, dark hair. The only color set on my face is when I'm cold because there's no heat, and it's winter when I lived back then. The most longest minutes of my life passed because I can't understand what the shit he's saying. And he says, "Show me how to open your door, please, baby." Okay, maybe he was trying to flirt or whatever, but I was so confused I literally show him how to open my apartment's door with mechanic gestures. After long, minutes fly away, then finally grabs the door handle. I was so happy, just yay, man, finally, please get out of here, please, please, please. He was just copying my gesture twice. Open, close, open, close. I don't remember whose phone it was that rang, but it snapped both of us out of this weird time lapse, and he finally decided he had to have to go. Thanks every hero in this galaxy, I'm free. After that, I was cleaning up every place he went. Opened the windows and showered myself because I don't even want to smell him on me. I have a sensitive sense of smell. I missed 1 week pretending I was sick and have no more motivation. Told my friends about it years after. 1 year later, I was moving with my best friend to share an apartment. Happy ending, bruh. So, I have a regular run-in with creeps, as you can tell from my last post about the high school weirdo. This happened more recently. I was 20, and I took my sister who was 16 to Starbucks in our area. We were sitting outside the cafe, and I noticed this guy who was a young Asian male, and wore a fedora, staring at us from inside. He didn't have coffee. He wasn't doing anything, just staring. My sister went back inside to go to the bathroom, and he promptly came out. He started talking to me, and he was weirdly very intelligent, and spoke like he was from the early 1900s. He told me his name was Clyde, and he jokingly asked if I could be his Bonnie. I was really creeped out by that, and my sister came out and he left back inside, but continued to stare. One day at my job, I was getting coffee in the mall. I work at in a Starbucks inside a Macy's, and of course, he was there. This location and the last location are about 5 miles apart, so I have no idea why this dude was here. Same thing, doing nothing, just staring. I went to my job and I would see him walk back and forth frequently, and I was so creeped out that he knew where I worked. One day when I was off, I got a text from my manager saying a young Asian man was looking for me, and that she already knew him as a creep because he had frequently followed her as well. I told her he was doing the same thing to me. You would probably think I'm lying at this point, but I go to the third Starbucks legit 15 miles from where I live, and he's there. I don't know if this dude is just really interested in Starbucks or what. He doesn't talk to me, but I go home, go to bed, and when I get ready to go to work, I see that someone wrote on my car with their finger, because my car is dirty and it said, "I'm in love with you." I honestly thought it was my boyfriend, and I called him telling that he was cute, and he was super concerned because it turns out it wasn't him. My first instinct is that it was this dude, Clyde. I since have moved jobs, but still in the area, and of course, our paths have met for the third time when I was just walking. He's sitting at the bar thing by a window of a food place, I don't know what it was, and he waved and blew me a kiss. I told my new job just in case he had happened to show up, and lo and behold, my manager dropped her jaw and said that the girl before me was being stalked by him as well. I honestly don't know how many girls he has done this to, and how he has the time to follow these girls, but he honestly radiates creepiness. I haven't seen him since, thank God, but every time I go to Starbucks, I scope the whole place out before I go in, to make sure he never sees me. To Clyde, I won't be your Bonnie, and I hope we never meet again. Hey, I'm on the phone, so sorry about the formatting. This isn't too climactic, but it did open my eyes to what people are capable of doing. So one day about 2 years ago, I was at my house with my younger sister and our friend. We were about 20 to 21 years old, all females. We were hungry and decided to go out and get some sushi. On the way to the restaurant, I noticed that I was low on gas, so I stopped to get some. I pulled up to the pump and parked the car. I went into the gas station to pay while my sister and our friend was waiting in the car. I was walking across the parking lot into the store. I noticed a man staring at me with a creepy smirk on his face. We made eye contact and yelled across the parking lot, "Hey, beautiful, why aren't you smiling?" I didn't respond or even acknowledge him. However, a young woman who witnessed this said to me, "Do not tell her to smile. She doesn't have to do anything for you. To this day, I think about that woman. I thanked her and continued walking to the store. As I stood patiently in line, the same man walked in. He came right over to me in line and started to touch me. He was rubbing my arms and lower back, and I pulled away. I said loudly, "Get away from me. I don't know you. Don't touch me or I'll defend myself." Other customers and the cashier were watching us. I caused a scene. He whispered in my ear and told me to shut up so people don't think he's a creep. Suddenly, the man ran out of the store and to my car with my sister and friend still inside of it. I ran after him. He opened the car door and started to say something to them when I yanked him back so hard from his shirt collar and punched him in the face. He proceeded to call me a bitch and every other name in the book, but he left us alone and got in his car and drove away. I'm much more aware of my surroundings now. To the creep gas station man, let's not meet. I was driving a rental car at 3 a.m. Just my friend Theo, name changed, and I heading home at the end of a busy road trip. We were on a twisting 2-lane road, and the kind with no streetlights, the kind that weaves through the mountains. We wanted to make it back before dawn, but a few hours from home, exhaustion hit us. Blurry-eyed and desperately trying to stay awake, we looked ahead for some place we could stop, anywhere with lights. There was almost no signal on our phones for search options, so we were relieved to finally see a distant gas station through the trees up ahead. It had been the only building and lights we had seen for miles. As I drove towards it, I saw a blare and realized I had just passed someone. A man walking a few paces off to the side beside the road, just at the edge of the woods. My brief glimpse had shown him in dark clothes, something long resting on his shoulder. "Huh," Theo said. I made some sound of acknowledgement. We'd both seen it. Weird, but we weren't concerned as we were too exhausted to care. Then we were both very frustrated that the gas station turned out to be a small medical clinic, long ago converted from a gas station. They had kept the typical awning above where the gas pumps would be. The lights were on outside, but the office was dark. We eased down the narrow gravel drive and paused in front of the building anyways, trying to get enough signal on our phones to look for a hotel, or somewhere safe to nap. Signal was still spotty, so we were resorting to paper maps. Neither one of us felt great about the spot, even if it was a little island in the light of the dark area. This is when the man showed up in the rearview mirror, continued walking along, keeping at the edge of the pool of light. I had an immediate bad feeling and started the engine. No lights, just engine. Didn't want to blind some poor guy just trying to get somewhere if that's all he was. He passed us by. I saw his back and realized he was carrying a flag on his shoulder, wrapped with cord. I couldn't quite make out the flag type. It looked like it might be a US flag, but it didn't look quite right. The bars were too thick and not quite enough, and I couldn't see if there were stars there at all. Hard to tell in the dark. And with the flag curled up, his clothes looked odd too, like some strange combination of a military surplus store, but I'd seen odd clothing on drifters before. He just passed on, kept walking into the dark, out of the light, out of sight. I told myself that he was just a local walking home from some hole-in-the-wall bar or homeless man heading to the next town. I told myself the exhaustion was getting to me, making me paranoid. We looked at the map for some time, cursing our bad signals, and finally we had figured out a route to what looked like the nearest large town to get either a hotel room or just a safe parking lot to nap in. We got ready to go. I told Theo he could put the seat back to nap. I had a second wind. We would make it. Theo sighed in relief and put his seat back. I was pretty sure he fell asleep in seconds. I tried my phone again, watching the signal flicker in and out, and then sighed and checked the paper map once more. Ready to go, I turned on the high beams to check out the narrow road that led us out of the lot, and my adrenaline shot up. Best energy drink I could have had. The man hadn't walked on. He stood there in the dark, and now my brights lit him up, facing us now. Dark clothes, dark military-style boots, dark complexion, and a huge smile. That smile raised the hairs in the back of my neck. It seemed all sort of off to me. He was staring at the car, just grinning, and he was blocking the little road to the front of us. I waited. If this guy wanted to mess with me, he'd have to come closer. He had waited a good distance away. I would wait for him to make his move. I checked behind me, gauging if I could quickly back up, but it had been a weird turn into the place, a gravel road, plus several concrete poles to move between. It would not have been a speedy path in reverse. I don't know this car well, and I'm not confident I could reverse without getting into an accident. I glanced at my sleeping friend, then the guy was suddenly in front of our car. I'm still not sure how he could have done that, in what must have been only a few seconds while I was looking away. I can only blame it on exhaustion how he was suddenly there, light shining on his white teeth and a huge weird grin. I must have made a noise because my friend woke up and sat up. "The fuck?" he managed. And the guy just stared at us, just grinning at us in the headlights standing right in front of my car. Just grinning. "Some crazy guy," I murmured. We had both lived in a big city. We dealt with typical crazies before. If they weren't armed, usually there was nothing to worry about. I saw no weapon. I was wary, but not scared. Then I noticed a heavy-looking point at the end of the flagpole, still resting against his shoulder, and the mental image of him spearing into my windshield, or just down into the hood of my car, was suddenly vivid. I had no idea what was going on, but I did not want to give this middle-of-the-night crazy a reason to attack the car, and I knew I couldn't quickly reverse to get us out of there. I waited, mentally willing the grinning nutcase to walk on with his weird flag and clothes. I have no idea how long he stood there, just staring at us and grinning. After what seemed to be a long moment, he began moving, but moving against the car and sliding to the side, slowly coming around to one slide, but dragging himself against the side of the car as he moved. The car shifted slightly with the weight, and I could hear the slide of cloth and the drag of the wooden flagpole on the side of the car. A small, ridiculous part of my brain congratulated me on buying the insurance for the rented car. Sure, he was scratching it. The grinning man gripped the driver's side mirror, as if using it for support, and leaned down. I saw a glimpse of that grin through my side window and looked away. I suddenly did not want to look at that freakish smile when it was only inches away from my face, just a little glass between us. Theo leaned over slightly, looking through the window. I saw my friend shake his head no, and he said firmly no. I saw the grinning man make a hand gesture, and Theo said louder, more ferociously, "No!" The man straightened, no longer leaning on the car. I saw his fist grip the pole, and I gunned it out of there. And he just stood there, the dark figure staying in the pool of the light as I shot out into the dark road. No longer sleepy at all, we had no problem staying awake to the next town, where we found a motel. Crazy flag-carrying man, let's not ever meet again. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out the video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification icon so you can be notified whenever my new videos drop. And as always, I just saw my dad beating the shit out of my mommy.